Millions of years ago, in the swamps of this land we now call North Dakota, dinosaurs reigned supreme. Where cowboys and cattle roam today, there were once herds of triceratops. Later there were herds of mesohippus, a small, 18-inch tall animal that is the ancestor of today's horse.
Well, mesohippus was one of the ancient horses that we find fossil remains of here in North Dakota. They lived here about 30 million years ago when North Dakota was a lot like an African savanna with huge herds of sheep-like animals, horses, camels, and those kinds of animals. It was a small horse. The adults were only 18 inches tall at the shoulder, although they were very similar in appearance to the modern horse, except they had 3 toes. Mesohippus, like many of the animals that lived here at that time, rhinos and camels, became extinct on the plains. A lot of people think that horses were introduced into North America by the Spaniards in the 1500s, but actually horses evolved in North America, became extinct here, and then were reintroduced by the Spaniards in historic times.
A 1,000 years ago, the plains and the badlands of North Dakota were home to herds of buffalo and groups of Native Americans who hunted and gathered to survive. "300 years ago, the Cheyenne, Lakota, and Crow tribes roamed the plains and badlands. The horse, the descendant of the mesohippus, was being used to hunt buffalo by some, while other tribes like the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara lived along rivers in fortified villages. In addition to hunting, they also farmed. The horse culture of the plains quickly developed, and the Hall of Fame tells the story of the Native Americans who were the first to claim the prairies with their horses.
For us, everything had spirit. Everything, even a rock, had a spirit. And so everything around us was spiritual then. So when the horse came to us, we had never seen big horses before. We have stories of little horses, and I don't know whether they were this big or whether they were 3 feet tall, but we do have stories of littler horses. It's the big horse that came along that became a surprise to us. And since we hadn't seen big horses, there hadn't been stories handed down in our oral history about big horses, then we believed, of course, since one, everything has spirit, that this must be a gift from the Creator.
Buffalo hunters, railroad surveyors, and soldiers soon arrived. There was conflict, and there was war. At major village sites like the Killdeer Mountains, Whitestone Hill, and the Badlands, the Plains Indians defended their territory and their way of life. But hunters, ranchers, and settlers also wanted this land. And with a government policy called Manifest Destiny, and an army to enforce that decision, the battle between cultures ended in 1876 with the Battle of the Little Bighorn. General George Custer and more than 260 of his men died. Although the Indians won the battle, they lost the war. The move to reservations was enforced by the Army, and 1876 is not referred to by Indians in their winter counts as the year they defeated Custer. To them, it is the year they lost the horse.
The entire lifestyle of Plains Indians, particularly the Lakota people, was tied to their horses. And the loss of their horses just marked really the end of so many of their lifeways. They had social customs, dances around the horse, and so on. All of those things were lost in a very short period of time, and it was a great loss to the people. And so it was a time of mourning, really, soon after the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And so they marked that then as the year we lost our horses.
The Native American horse culture was soon replaced by the horse culture of the trail drivers who brought the first herds north from Texas. The open range ranchers, the first settlers, and cattle herds replaced buffalo. The iron horse and wagon train now moved across the plains where the tribes once roamed. Cattle moved east to market and people came west. People around the world heard about cowboys, open range, free land, and freedom. Most didn't speak English, but they believed, sold their belongings, and headed for the new frontier.
In Belfield in the early 80s, I think is a good example. There was a man there from the American East named Harbison who ran the general store. And the population of Belfield, it's about 1885, right in there, was 100. And he remembered that only one of the 100 spoke English, that he conducted all his business in sign language. To the people of Europe and to the people in eastern United States, where in Kentucky the average farm was about 30 acres, the promise of free land, 160 acres under the Homestead Act, and you get 160 more under the Tree Claim Act, this was really appealing.
Among those who arrived in the 1880s, the charismatic Marquis de Moore. The flamboyant French nobleman was determined to build a ranching and beef-packing empire on the open range. He built the city of Medora and named it for his wife. He also built a beef-packing plant and a beautiful chateau that sits just blocks away yet today. The Marquis, who had fought duels in France, also brought barbed wire. His decision to fence the open range touched off a war of words that ended in a gun battle just blocks from where you sit. When the smoke cleared, the Marquis and his men rode away. But a cowboy named Riley Lufsey lay dead. The Marquis was tried for murder 3 times and acquitted. But his packing plant and ranch lost millions. And within a few years, he and his beautiful wife and dreams of a Western empire were gone.
The idea was terrific. No one had thought of this really, where you would slaughter the beef right on the range and ship it to the east. There were some problems, however. His business sense was lacking. His plans were grandiose. He overstretched himself. The whole idea of cornering the whole New York City market and establishing his own butcher shops there raised the anger not only of the meat barons, but also the New York butchers. The plan was way too large, and he couldn't handle it.
Teddy Roosevelt also arrived in the Badlands in 1883. The Eastern dude arrived wearing a buckskin outfit custom made by Brooks Brothers, guns and a knife from Tiffany's. He may have looked like a greenhorn, but he could ride with the best and soon earned the respect of fellow cowboys and ranchers. Old Four Eyes, as he was called here in Medora, could use his fists and use his gun. Roosevelt became president in 1901 and returned to Medora for a community celebration in 1903. He always said he would never have been president had it not been for the time he spent in North Dakota. Great-grandson Tweed Roosevelt agrees.
And it was here in North Dakota that he learned that it's much more important what a person is than what what his family is or how much money he has or what his particular connections are in various ways. And the cowboys and the ranchers and the others out in Medora taught him that.
The story of the Marquis and former president are legendary, but stories of thousands of others who left Europe or simply moved further west to the plains to become cowboys is the story of America. People seeking freedom, a new life, a chance at the American dream. Theirs is a story of struggle and perseverance. Blizzards with 30 below zero temperatures in the winter and drought and hoppers in the summer. Many like the Marquis and Teddy Roosevelt didn't survive the trials of the plains, but most refused to be driven from this land and their dream. They stayed and they built homes, churches, schools. They may have been 30 miles from a town and miles from a neighbor, but they gathered, prayed, danced, argued, married, raised families, and created a ranching industry. After they lost their battle for the land and were sent to reservations, many Native Americans learned to survive by becoming ranchers, cowboys, and great rodeo riders. They have also preserved their culture and the story they want told for the next 1,000 years. Hall of Fame advocate Phil Baird is a former rodeo rider who knows this is a story worth preserving.
The reservations, when they were first established during the century, one of the major things that they try to have American people do is to work the land, and specifically work in agriculture and farming. Native people very close to the horses and the horse culture, so to some degree ranching was kind of a natural, working with horses and cattle. And to some degree there were some people who were very successful in working with ranches and farms. Turn of the century, you had rodeo just was evolving, and part of it came out of the Wild West shows. And initially you had American Indian people that were traveling the Wild West shows to kind of do the reenactments of the so-called Indian Wars. And through that experience came some individuals who rather be down at the buck and horse end of things.
Rodeo began as a Sunday afternoon at the ranch contest and slowly evolved into a professional sport. Every ranch had its top hand and every small town had its rodeo. Some of the world's best bucking horses and bronc riders began on reservations and small ranches. Jim Tesher, one of 15 kids in a local ranch family, began his career in Medora's arena back in the 1940s. He became part of the famed North Dakota six-pack that dominated rodeo nationally in the 1950s and 60s.
And he's still there, Jim Tesher, North Dakota boy.
One thing you've got to have is try. I don't care what they say. You got to want to do it, and I think you got to have a lot of luck. I've always said this. Well, I guess as Will Rogers said, you're better off being lucky than good. Well, I say if you're good, you're lucky, because everybody that rodeos wants to be good, but not all of them are lucky enough to do it. That's the way I feel. I was lucky that I could ride broncs as good as I did.
Today, rodeo is a multi-million-dollar sport. Here in North Dakota, world champions live within minutes of where you sit. On any given weekend in a local arena, you can watch the best of the best before they head for Cheyenne, Las Vegas, and Dallas to carry on their traditions. The stories of the Hall of Fame's inductees are preserved in the Hall of Honorees. The Hall of Honorees is the centerpiece of the Hall of Fame and will tell the stories of those who created the unique Plains horse culture. The archives and photo collections also show the lives and sacrifices made by men and women who tamed this great land. Thanks for coming to the North Dakota Cowboy Hall of Fame, Center of Western Heritage and Cultures, Native American, Ranching and Rodeo. Sitting Bull, Riley Lufsey, Mustache Maud Black, Teddy Roosevelt, the boys from the Six Pack, Sakakawea, A.C. Haida Cooper and Whiz Bang. They're waiting to tell you their story.